Want to know why? So do I. Ask how. Howard, the humongous. 3 Cambridge University researchers writing in biology letters have proposed an idea that Science Daily sums up like this. Opportunity, not necessity, is the mother of invention. Yes, necessity is not the mother of invention. Says the Science Daily article summarizing the Cambridge University trio, quote, when food is scarce, tool use among non-human primates does not increase. Again, necessity is not the mother of invention. If invention does not come from necessity, if innovation doesn't emerge from poverty and distress, where does creativity come from? Could it be that invention is what large mammal expert Valerius Geist calls a luxury behavior? What's worse, could breakthroughs come from 3 things we've been taught to despise? Materialism, consumerism, and vanity, vain display. Could innovation really be triggered by luxuries like exuberance, exultation, delight, insight, and curiosity? A new book called Mass Flourishing, written by Edmund Phelps, a Nobel Prize-winning economist, surveys the last 9,600 years of ingenuity and concludes that explosions of innovation have happened almost entirely in 4 countries, the really big explosions. Those 4 countries are Britain, France, Germany, and the US. And Phelps contends that most of human innovation has happened in the 140 years between 1820 and 1960. What did Britain, France, Germany, and the USA have in common between 1820 and 1960? Not poverty. Far from it. Yes, there were poor people in these nations. But during the 140 years that Phelps thinks were the most inventive in history, Britain, France, Germany, and the USA got richer and richer. In fact, by the end of that period, the poorest paid worker in each country was earning roughly what 6 workers had earned at the beginning of the period. Yes, 1 low-wage worker earned what 6 had formerly brought in. That is a radical upgrade in wealth and a radical decrease in necessity. Does invention come from necessity, or does it come from opportunity? Does necessity come from poverty and starvation, or does it come from abundance? Let's look at one relatively poor kid, Thomas Alva Edison. Paper makes so much noise. Edison's father made his living splitting wood for roofing shingles, tailoring clothes, owning a tavern, and making real estate investments. In other words, Edison's father worked his way up to the middle class. In fact, he was a small business owner. And Thomas Alva Edison himself was showered with unconventional luxuries. Edison set up his first laboratory, a chemical lab, in his basement when he was only 10. He only spent a few months in school and then was taught to read, do math, and most important, to believe in himself by his mother. But being freed of school gave Edison what some kids would find impoverishing and others would see as a jackpot. The chance to go into the job market on his own terms and the opportunity to adventure. When he was 12, Edison jumped into a luxury trade, working on the hot and rapidly expanding new transport technology of the day, railroad trains. Edison had a form of work most boys would have died for. He traveled at high speed every day. He rode the trains the 63 miles between Port Huron and Detroit, selling candy and newspapers. And he rapidly became not just entrepreneurial, but innovative. When he was 15, Edison stopped selling other people's newspapers and founded his own, the Weekly Herald. He compiled the paper himself and printed it on the train, a first. A first that got him written up in the Times of London. Yes, the Times of London. So Edison got his first shot at international celebrity at the age of, get this, 15. The same year, Edison saved a toddler from being run down by a train in a railroad yard. The baby's father was so grateful that he taught Edison how to operate the hottest new telecommunications technology of the day, the telegraph. Like the railroad business, the telegraph industry was growing explosively. Once you knew Morse code and how to operate a telegraph key, the job supply was endless. The teenage Edison got telegraph jobs as far away as Canada and Boston. In Boston, Edison ran into another luxury: free knowledge. By now he was 19, and he was taken under the wing of one of the most advanced experts on the telegraph industry, telegraph technology, and electrical devices of the day, Benjamin Franklin Bredding, a man who would later work with Alexander Graham Bell on the telephone. Now let's see if we can turn these pages again. Recalcitrant pieces of paper. That's when Edison began working on multiplexing telegraph signals and creating ways for telegraph companies to send many signals down a single line at once, thus saving millions of dollars in the cost of stringing new lines. But Edison made his first big score after he actually had been down and out, briefly down and out, very briefly down and out. Edison traveled from Boston to New York at the age of 22 and landed penniless, in debt, and jobless in New York. But when he was job hunting in Manhattan, he just happened to be in the office of the Golden Stock Telegraph Company when their stock ticker broke down. Nobody could fix it. And without a ticker, a stock and gold telegraph company is out of business. Edison was the only person in the place who could get the machine working. In fact, he knew how to take it apart and put it back together again. That skill brought Edison a job at the unspeakably huge sum of $300 a month, the equivalent of nearly $70,000 a year in today's salaries. Not bad for a 22-year-old. And Edison's work at the Golden Stock Telegraph Company inspired him to invent a universal stock ticker, a device for which he was paid $40,000. That's $770,000, $770,000 in today's money. And he got it at the age of 22. So Edison's inventions came from the luxury of control over his own time, enormous curiosity, exposure to opportunity, placement in explosively growing industries, the opportunity to travel, and inside involvement in the hottest technologies of his day. That was not necessity. That was not poverty. That was abundance. Edison's inventions did not come from pain, misery, and deprivation. They came from adventure, opportunity, and audacity. And Edison's inventions came from the sheer joy of solving problems and of doing it with gadgetry. Let me give you another anecdotal example to ponder. You know the story of how Archimedes ran through the streets of Syracuse shouting, "Eureka," I found it when he came up with the solution to a thorny problem. What you might not know is that Archimedes' great discovery, his discovery of Archimedes' principle, did not come from poverty and cruel necessity. Far from it. It came from the lap of luxury. Paper, it makes so much noise. Here are the details that appear in the story's original source, Vitruvius, the first century architect, civil engineer, and author. Archimedes lived in the lap of luxury. He lived among the aristocrats and rulers of his hometown, Syracuse, which happened to be the capital of the island of Sicily. Hiron was a high-ranking general in town, which is not bad for the illegitimate son of a noble. But it was about to get better. Heron made a deal with the Romans, who liked what he had to offer and named him king, a big step up from mere general. Heron wanted to celebrate his new power by having a special crown made. He carefully weighed out the gold for the crown himself and gave it to a crown maker who, says Vitruvius, carried out the contract, quote, with great skill and perfectly on schedule. Heron approved the crown, but had his doubts. The headpiece seemed bulkier than it should be. Heron suspected that the craftsman had made off with some of the gold and replaced it with something cheaper, silver. So the new king hired Archimedes for a consulting job to figure out if there was silver mixed in with the gold in the crown. This is not poverty. This is the peak of luxury. Crowns, gold, silver, and it gets even more luxurious. Says Vitruvius, Archimedes went to the baths. If you've ever read about or seen pictures of Roman bathhouses, they were huge, gorgeous buildings with heated floors and elaborate tilings designed to give wealthy Romans the luxury of soaking in the company of other high-placed, powerful Romans. When Archimedes slipped into one of the tubs, he noticed that the further he slipped in, the more water sloshed out. The more of his body was in the tub, the more water he displaced. That's when the light bulb went off. And Archimedes leapt out of the tub and ran through the streets naked, shouting, "I've found it," which in Greek is Eureka. Where was Archimedes running? Home. Why? When he got to his place, he made 2 lumps of metal that weighed precisely as much as Heron's crown. 1 lump was gold, and 1 lump was silver. Having this much precious metal laying around the house is not exactly poverty. Next, Archimedes filled, quote, a large vessel to the brim with water and submerged the lump of silver. He measured the water that spilled over the vessel's edge. Then he refilled the basin to the brim and put in the lump of gold. The gold made less water slosh out of the tub. The gold was denser than the silver. It took less space. So when Archimedes put his clothes on and went to see the king, he dunked the king's crown in a basin of water and measured how much water spilled out, exactly how much water spilled out. By measuring the water, Archimedes could tell 2 things: that silver indeed had been mixed with the gold, and he could tell exactly how much silver and gold were in the crown. Said Vitruvius, Archimedes had discovered the contractor's flagrant theft. Neither Edison nor Archimedes were in the painful grip of poverty. Neither were in a state of life and death necessity. Nor were the chimps, orangutans, and bearded capuchins in the studies of tool use surveyed by the 3 Cambridge researchers who wrote that a lack of food doesn't explain new tool innovation among lower primates. The stories of Edison and Archimedes are mere anecdotes. They are not facts and figures. But they suggest something important, that necessity is not the mother of invention. Distress and pain are not the makers of breakthroughs. Negatives are not the nurturers of ingenuity. Far from it. Luxury, overflow, and pleasure trigger creative leaps. The stories of Edison and Archimedes suggest this, but they do not prove it. However, if it's true that abundance is the mother of creativity, why would that be? Cosmos? Could it be that this is a cosmos that wallows in surplus? A cosmos of
manic mass production? A cosmos in which overflow leads to massive upward leaps? Again, could abundance be adventure's real mother? This is Howard the Humongous, speaking to you from the future. It's your job and my job to make, or, ready? You want to know why? Ask how. And now for that slimy, slippery, subversive, seditious, little off. I think if I'm in luck, I've found it.